All right, Scott, we're inside of our wood structure. We're gonna fast forward in the project. We've got our windows and doors installed, play along with me. We've got a roof over our building. We are dried in or blacked in. We are saying that we are ready to start working on the inside of the building. So the next step would be obviously our mechanical rough ends. That'd be our MEP, our mechanical, our electrical, and our plumbing. Get all those rough ends taken care of, any energy code items, our insulation.
Right.
We would obviously be passing some inspections at this point, whether it was air testing on the plumbing, a pre-drywall inspection by the local jurisdiction to make sure all of our fasteners and bearing points were correct. And at that point, once we pass that pre-drywall inspection, it'd be time to work on interior finishes.
Yeah.
So here's a little tidbit as the construction manager. A lot of times people get excited at this stage because you went from nothing, a bare piece of ground, to now you have this building sticking up in the air. And it probably happened in the big scheme relatively quick. And a lot of people start thinking, well, we're almost finished. We're moving along quickly. Really, we're only about halfway there to finish the project, because now the finish work is all that detail work that takes a long time.
Right, and depending on what market you're buying in residential, that process could be very short, or it could be really drawn out, depending on the level of the customization of the house.
Right.
Kind of the work you do, it's a little bit longer than what a production builder's doing.
Right. Are we using finished materials that are standard off the shelf? Or are we making one-of-a-kinds out in the field? Right. Are we buying imported product and waiting for transportation to get it to us? There's a lot of variables.
So what's the first step in the process?
Once we pass our pre-drywall finish, in most cases in the United States, our interior finish on our walls is going to be drywall and paint, or gypsum board. So drywall is just a simple slurry that they put together with paper facing on each side. Various size sheets. Guess what? We're back to our 4x8 sheets, just like we were before. We have different heights, 4x8. Sometimes we'll tip the 8 and we'll run it vertical, but a lot of times we'll see it horizontal. So 4 foot up from the floor and run it across the room. And those sheets go 10s, 12s, 14s, 16s. We also change the thickness based on a span. A 1/2 inch thick drywall is perfectly fine to span 16 inches. It's got rigidity to it. It's a good product. And this is a product that has replaced the older school technique of plaster and lath, which became, as we had less skilled trades that did plaster and lath, which is troweling on a mud finish that then hardens. Obviously, putting up a 4x8 sheet, adding the screws, and then going to mud and tape that is much faster. You put up that 32 square foot just like that, as opposed to plaster and lath. Now, going across, say, a ceiling, we may be dealing with floor joist or roof trusses that are 2 foot on center, and that's where we jump to, say, a 5/8 drywall. It's a versatile product. They have a drywall that has different facings on it, like a green or a purple face where it can take a little more moisture, say a bathrobe. Then they have even more stepped up where it has fiberglass facings on it, where we can actually use it as an exterior sheathing, or in a very high moisture environment, say like an indoor pool, like in a commercial building or even a home. So that drywall would go on, get fastened to the walls, usually tacked in with nails, but then finished off with screws, and then we have to go to the mud and tape process. And that all goes back to our steps. Standard on a wall, where they're going to go ahead and put in a paper tape or fiberglass mesh tape and put on the trowel on the first coat of mud. Once it dries, see if any sanding needs to be done, and then put on 1 or 2 more layers of mud. And that's over every joint or every seam in the drywall, plus all of the screw heads. Ceilings might be treated smooth just like that, or they might get a stamped on texture for acoustic reasons or architectural reasons.
So do we have different levels of finish?
Absolutely. We have levels at 3, 4, 5, and level 5 is a very high level of finish, multiple sandings, and then an overall bonding coat over the whole thing to try to get the wall as perfectly smooth as we can. We talked about the imperfections of the studs. So the drywall, since it's screwed to our studs, is going to show those same imperfections. Right, yeah. So you can take any drywall job, even a level 5 finish, and shine a light across that wall and still see those fine imperfections. But we're trying, if someone wants that level of finish and has the budget, we can step those finishes up on the surface of the drywall. Then would become our painting. Right over those surfaces, a primer, and 1 or 2 coats of finish, or maybe even more. And that's typically how we see a lot of structures in the United States on a wall finish.
Right.
When we talk about finishes, keep in mind we're talking about electrical finishes, plumbing finishes, HVAC or mechanical finishes like the registers, floor registers, ceiling registers, cold air return grills. So when you start talking finishes, the sky is the limit.
Right.
Think about how many different floor coverings we could have. I have a supplier that supplies only hard surface floor finishes. So we're talking some type of tiles, we're talking hardwood floors, engineered hardwood floors, laminate floors, vinyl floors. They don't supply any carpet. The last time I checked, that one supplier had over 9,000 floor finishes that you could select from.
Wow.
And they're really not that big of a supplier in the tile segment. They're really big in the other segments that I talked about. So then add in all the different carpets, all the other terrazzos and different finishes you could do on a floor, and it's staggering how many different finishes. Add to that faux finishes on the walls with paint, with texture, murals, every plumbing finish, door hardware, all the way down to the door stops that keep the door from slamming into the wall, your bathroom accessories, towel bars, toilet paper holders, and the level of finish is staggering in a building. Yep. So we get into a commercial building, we probably don't have the level of finishes in a commercial building. We see a lot of VCT on the floor, like a vinyl composite tile. We'll see some drop ceiling material for acoustical ceilings, things like that. But think about the level of finish that's added in a commercial building. We have things like signage, exit signs, room number signs, things like that. In a school setting, we'd have dry erase boards, we'd have AV equipment, which we could still have in residential, but probably a different level in commercial. We might have fire suppression finishes, and then we'd throw in all of the ADA, the American Disability Act, where we'd have those finishes. Mm-hmm. Grab bars needed in the bathroom, wheelchair ramps, accessibility, power doors, you name it. So we can't spend a lot of time going into detail on finishes simply because there are tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of finishes, and there's more every single year.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Scott, we're on the outside of our building. Let's go ahead and play the same game. We've got our windows already installed. Our exterior doors are at least a cold door, which is just the door that we're going to put in the opening so we can secure the building. It may not be our finished door,
right,
but it can take a beating during construction. We're already incorporating our weather-resistant barriers, so we talk about exterior finish. And similar to we spoke about on interior finishes, there's a myriad of choices for exterior finishes. We talk about things like, let's just stay with the siding category right now, lap siding. So if we think about the way it originally started with clapboard type siding, small, close together, redwood, cedar shakes, yep. Those were our most common.
So Mark, when I was in the trade, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was building homes, it seemed to me all of the custom homes were being built in masonry and cedar. Cedar was like everywhere.
Right. It was king. So like many things, there's a limited supply of cedar. right? It grows slower. We talked about how fast, now construction lumber is just a crop, basically,
Yeah.
a 7-year crop in the case of a 2x4, but it's still a crop. Cedar takes longer to grow. There's less of it out there. So over time, we have more population in the world, more structures going up in the world, the cost went up. So products came out to help replace. The other thing about a wood exterior is it takes what? Maintenance.
Yeah.
And let's face it, many of our building owners, the last thing on their mind is maintenance. They're busy people too. They just want to come home. If we're talking about their house, they want to come home at the end of the day. They don't want to have to worry about maintenance. So the industry has created a lot of exterior products to think about maintenance issues. Now, in the case of masonry, you mentioned that. We used to see a lot of brick homes.
Yeah.
We see fewer and fewer of that. The cost of fuel, so that the cost of transporting the brick from the plant to the brickyard to the end user, labor. Laying brick is very labor intensive. It's time consuming. So cost of labor has gone up. And as those costs have risen, people have opted for maybe just accent brick or less brick. But if we stay on siding for a minute, we've seen a tremendous amount of products enter the market in the last 30, 40 years. Vinyl siding, PVC siding, just like PVC pipe, they can form that into siding. All types of composite, from fiber cement, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a mixture of fiber, cement, water, and they can form it kind of like I guess like a chicken nugget, right? You can put it through the form machine and turn it into lap siding, turn it into shake siding, turn it into trim boards. They can turn that slurry into almost anything they want. And we can use those products on the exterior of their home. Like many finishes, whether it's interior or exterior, budget is always a consideration. Life cycle or longevity is a consideration. Maintenance of the product would be a consideration. And then, of course, just the architectural detail. Do you like the way it looks? And those are just a few of the consideration. Labor, how intensive is the labor going to be to involve that product? How specialized is the labor?
Right.
Can you even find a crew? I went to find a crew, and I needed them to put on slate on a roof. And we don't see slate very often. We still see some of it on Purdue's campus, but we don't see slate in residential very often. As a matter of fact, in 33 years, I've come across it twice.
Right.
I had to contact the installation crew out of Chicago, and they were, the initial budgets I was getting was $1,500 of labor per 100 square feet. Now compare that to, say, an asphalt shingle. If you remember our shingling sequence, we can find that starting at around $55 per square. $55, $1,500. So all of those things when we're picking an exterior finish are all gonna play into what's that finish gonna be. Right. Whether it's real stone, cultured stone, brick, face brick or thin brick, so we can hold the weight down. Instead of a 4-inch brick, it's only about 1/4 of an inch thick. All the different sidings, not only the material of the siding, but the lap or the exposed face of the siding, the thickness of the siding. Does the siding have a foam or energy back on it? And then we throw in color choices. Right. And you can see where the amount of decisions, or the amount of options, I guess would be a better way to put it, just keeps growing and growing and growing. Even when you talk about brick, do we want to do any detail work in the brick? Do we want to rake the joint back and tool it and get it nice and smooth? Do we want to let it squeeze out a little bit? How about we color the mortar joint? Do we want to add an additive instead of just that gray type in mortar? Do we want to make it a light tan or a dark brown? We can keep adding option after option after option. So similar to our interior finishes, we can't touch on them all. Go ahead and educate yourself. Watch the TV shows that are out there. There's a lot of home makeover, home purchasing shows. I still enjoy watching them because you might see a new product. You might see an old product used in a new way, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not, because the person who did it did not have the proper training or did not do the research necessary, and maybe they used a product in a new and unique way that's going to cause them a lot of problems in the future. So there's so many tools out there to educate yourself on the types of finishes that are available. Take advantage of them.